Welcome to NY Seed Round, one-on-one conversations with the founders, investors, and operators, proving NYC is the best place to build a business. Hey everyone, I have JJ, co-founder and CEO of Burnt. You have a really interesting background. I think I read that you grew up in the restaurant industry. Can you tell me a little bit about that? How that shaped your experience?
For sure. I think growing up in the restaurant space, growing up in the food industry actually. So my family's been in the food service business for 80 years.
Wow.
I'm originally from India, and my great-grandfather was one of the first people to import shrimp to the US. And basically every generation since has worked either on the supplier side or on the restaurant side. So, you know, my cousins, my uncles, my aunts, everybody has worked in the space. That company that my great-grandfather started 80 years ago is now headquartered in Jersey City.
Really?
So like from when I was in diapers, I've been surrounded by the restaurant industry, and I got to work in restaurants since I was 12. It's actually where I met one of my co-founders. And you really see how difficult the industry is. I think as a consumer, when you go and have a lovely meal at a restaurant, you really don't realize the struggle that goes into bringing that plate to your table. It has you get a lot more appreciation towards the industry, and like I personally think everyone, if they can, should work in the service industry at some point. It teaches a lot of grit and really humbles you.
I was a server in college. I can very much, empathize with that. I have an obvious question. Why did you not become a chef?
I think when I was a kid, I was too hot-headed.
Yeah.
I knew that when I'm chopping onions and if someone's yelling at me, it's probably not the right mixture. But I did love cooking. Aside from that, I did love cooking. I still do love cooking. It's my zen space. So for me, if I had gone into a high-tempo environment where it took that love of cooking away from it, I probably would have hated cooking at this point. So I'm really happy that I didn't end up becoming a chef, but I'm lucky to still be able to be in the space and work with chefs.
So you grew up in the restaurant industry, grew up around it, and then you head into, an interesting field. You lead procurement at a seafood company. Like, we haven't even gotten to the tech story yet. Tell me about that experience.
Yeah, so coming back to, I decided I didn't want to be a chef. I still wanted to be in the food space. And then it was more of like, okay, how do I get involved in the restaurant industry? So like I said, my family has been in the food service business for decades, and there was a shrimp factory in India that my uncle was running. So I decided after university to move to India, to a town in the middle of nowhere where it was just shrimp farms, and basically learned the whole back end of the supply chain. So everything from when a shrimp egg is laid into the pond until it's ready to harvest, it's packed, frozen, and sent off to wherever the world is going. And for me, that was like my foot in the door to the food industry. And it was such a crazy experience because that factory that I was working at, every morning you would get a 20-ton delivery of raw shrimp. And that's like one factory, and there are 1,000 factories in India alone. And then you just multiply that by every single part of the food industry you think of. It's crazy to think the scale of the food industry. So then after that, I moved to the US, took everything I learned in the shrimp farm, and I was handling global procurement. And I think that's where I realized that this industry is incredible, but it's also extremely antiquated. So the company I was working at, we were buying about 3,500 containers of raw shrimp, raw fish, and it was all tracked on an Excel sheet. And my job was managing the inventory and managing the procurement as well.
So paint me a picture. What's challenging about that?
So food service industry that we were selling into, especially when it comes to like raw protein and frozen protein, the margins are terrible. So the way you make up your money is by managing your inventory better and your movement better. So if you have a container coming into the port, it needs to go straight from the port to your customer. If you have it sitting in your warehouse, you're incurring costs on top of it, and you're losing those little margins that you have. So for me, it was crazy because 3,500 containers, you're managing on one Excel sheet, and you're burning cash. And at the end of the day, you're responsible for it, right? So that's, I would say, that was like the catalyst for me to start diving into the tech space, because I wanted to see if there was any other solutions out there that this company could bring in. So I started initially seeing what other sides of the business that we could like bring in some kind of software. So for our overseas logistics, we started working with Flexport. For our local logistics, we had another company that did the full truckloads and LTLs called LoadSmart. So like that, we slowly started to digitize other antiquated sides of this business. And then I started looking at, okay, now let's look at the procurement side of things. And, we were doing a large portion of our business towards, large supermarket chains. That's where the lowest margins are. So I was thinking we should grow the restaurant side of the business. Incremental more margins, but it'll make a huge difference in the long run. But what I realized there was, as a supplier, there was nothing out there for me to have an online presence, reach out to more restaurants, and grow that side of the business. So that's where I started to understand, like, oh wow, like suppliers find it really hard to grow their business. And then on the flip side, restaurants also probably find it extremely difficult to find suppliers and manage their procurement. And that's where the initial idea of Burnt started, but obviously at that point it wasn't burnt. It was just an idea that I had written down on a
Right.
document. But I knew I wanted to pursue that at some point. But at the same time, all I had was restaurant industry experience and experience as a supplier. I had no idea about anything in the tech world. So
I mean, it's a pretty strong start. You always look for somebody that has domain expertise, and it's kind of fun that you get to work on something that's tangentially related to something that was so formative in your growing up years.
yeah, for sure.
So for those that may not know yet, what is Burnt?
Great question. So basically at Burnt, we're helping restaurants to take their data, clean it up, and automate their back of house. So when I mean back of house, I basically mean anything to do with inventory, procurement, looking at your P&L, basically any back of house operations. And right now, the way restaurants do it is extremely antiquated. So when it comes to inventory, it could be anything from pen and paper, like legacy systems. Some restaurants don't even have the time to manage their inventory. And then on the procurement side of things, it's usually like emails, phone calls, WhatsApp. There are some restaurants in New York City that still fax orders through their suppliers. So these antiquated processes, obviously it takes time, but more than time, it adds up to losing money on the food cost side of things. And in an industry where margins are so razor thin, like that could be the make or break for these people.
Yeah. Is it fair to say that, restaurant business is obviously really hard, that many of the folks that maybe go out of business, one of the main reasons is maybe they don't have the best procurement function in the first place? Is that one of the contributing factors?
So the way I look at it is, I think the people in the restaurant industry, like the people who really start these businesses, they're artists, right? So cooking and serving that food to their consumers is the art side of things. So they go into the business thinking about that. What they don't realize is all of the admin business side of things that come along with it. And that is where a lot of the times businesses make or break, whether it's managing your labor or controlling your food cost. It's such a nuanced thing that takes so much time and effort that, if they don't dedicate enough resources towards it, like there's no way forward.
Yeah, that makes sense. And admittedly, I know very little about, the ins and out of the restaurant industry other than the amazing essay that Anthony Bourdain wrote about it that sort of exposed it to the rest of the world. Walk me through the day in the life of a restaurant owner. Everything from opening the restaurant to, managing it, the stresses involved. Tell me a little bit about that.
Great question. I think it's probably one of the hardest jobs that I've seen. I don't think I would be able to do that.
Yeah, you mentioned you didn't become a chef.
Yeah. I mean, I think it's crazy because there's so many things involved. It's like I said, right? One side of it is the creative aspect of what is that perfect dish that I want to serve to my customers? How do I bring the consistency for it? So one side of it is, who do you bring in? Like, what is your team that you bring in, right? But aside from that, on a day-to-day basis, like first thing in the morning, you have to make sure all your deliveries from your suppliers yesterday have come in. And then what happens if the supplier, sent you beef brisket instead of hanger steak? Then you have to call them, and all these things snowball at one time. Like what I like to say is most of these restaurant owners, chefs, GMs, they're firefighters in the restaurant industry. All they do is put out fires. They're reacting and they're not proactive in a way. And it's not their fault. It's just that's how the business is. Yeah. So, I would be calling my supplier while I'm making sure my commie chefs are, doing all the prep. And then on top of that, something in the kitchen might break. You have to call the maintenance people. It's honestly, I don't know if you've seen The Bear, but that I would say is probably one of the best depictions of what it's like in the industry that I've ever seen on TV. Right. It's chaos, but it's organized chaos in a way.
It captures the actual essence of it versus like others that may not. That makes sense. Why did you decide on a mobile first UX to Burnt?
Great question. I think for us it started with Burnt started with the idea of procurement first. It wasn't what it is now. So when we started, it was how do you make it easier for a chef or a restaurant owner while they're going into the back of the kitchen, while they're in the walk-in, to take care of their ordering, right? So right now how they would do it is they probably have a clipboard that they would mark everything down on. So how do you digitize that? So the idea was on a phone. So make it where that 30-minute process of placing one order with one supplier becomes 3 clicks instead. So that naturally had to be on your phone. But then as we started to build out that phone, the mobile app, we started to realize that, from the restaurants and the owners itself, they were pointing us in the direction that procurement is more than just that act of ordering ingredients, but it's actually so many decisions that happen before that lead to that actual placing that order. And that's how we then decided to morph into the back of house operations software.
Got it. And I think you have 2 offerings, right? There's the supplier piece, but could you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, of course. So for us, again, it was in a marketplace, it's like the chicken or the egg, right? What do you go for first? For us, the first step we wanted to do is how do we give a software to restaurants that actually improves their bottom line and streamlines their business and automates the processes that should be automated. We don't want to automate everything. We don't want to take jobs away. We want to automate the things and basically give like a superpower to these people, right? Yeah. Similarly, on the supplier side of things, there are tons of issues that they face, right? There's so much manual data entry involved. There's so much miscommunication with their customers, and there's such a lack of like online presence on the supplier side of things. So what we want to do is also empower them to be able to reach more customers, improve the way they take care of their existing customers. And so instead of, wasting time on like a manual order entry, they're upselling their customers instead of doing all these manual tasks. And I think it's, again, on the same side, it's like for restaurants, how do you help them to save money? And on the supplier side, how do you help them to improve their functions and make more money?
Right. That makes sense. It seems interesting that this is a really interesting marketing challenge too, because your end customer are restaurant owners, that sort of thing. We're seeing more like applications pop up. What's the selling process look like for Burnt? Like in terms of, how you grow your customer base? They're very busy people, right?
They are, 100%. I think this is where like we're taking a very different angle. I think a lot of other companies in the restaurant space, they look at the industry, they see 750,000 restaurants in America. They see a $1 trillion market, and they think, if I grab this much, I'm going to be a $1 billion company or whatever it is, right? And they take a tech sales approach to it. So if you look at all of these companies on their job postings, they need SaaS sales experience. For us, the way we look at it is when we start hiring, we want service industry experience. We can teach you the sales side of things, but we cannot teach you the 5-10 years of grueling in the back of the kitchen that you had to go through to understand the industry. So for us, even now, it's founder-led sales right now, and quite frankly, we just walk into the restaurant. Yeah. My co-founder Rhea, she does a lot of research beforehand, so we know who's the restaurant owner, who's the GM, who are we gonna walk in and ask for, and quite frankly, we walk straight into the kitchen and ask like, is Chef Mike in today? We're here to just quickly chat with him. And I think the other thing is you have to sell without selling to restaurants. Like a lot of these restaurant owners and chefs know that there are challenges in the kitchen, but they don't want to be sold to. Right. They want to buy things that make their lives easier and save them money.
So what's the key to making it connect?
I think it's 2 sides of it. One is, I think, understanding that we are from the industry and we are here to be partners in the industry and not purely just sell you on something and charge you for it. And the other side of it is translating that into the actual product. So the way, for example, my co-founder Rhea builds the product is it's completely built with the mindset of these people from the industry, right? So you give these people, like our design partners, we give them a canvas and tell them to paint that picture of what Burnt should be for them. And I think that's the biggest difference between us and anyone else out there. Everyone else in the industry is trying to build an ERP system for restaurants. we don't think restaurants need an ERP system. Like I mentioned earlier, they're
That's
putting
kind of a
fires
tough sell. They're busy like trying to figure out where am I going to get my fish for tomorrow or like next week. They're not asking like, do I have a digital core from my technology?
Exactly. So the idea is Burnt is basically you log in, we'll take all your data, everything, clean it up for you and give you 3 actionable insights. And it's that simple.
Gotcha. So I want to double click. That is so interesting that one of the sort of qualifications you look for is somebody who worked in the server business or the restaurant business as a whole. Do you think that there's an insight there for other like software sellers that are selling into industries? Do you think it helps just from an empathy standpoint?
I think, I'm not sure about other industries, but I know in this industry, there are so many nuances in restaurants and things that only people who have actually lived through it will really understand. Like, I'd like to say restaurants are driven with passion and no logic, right? So you have to take that passion and digitize it, not the logic and digitize it. So I think it is a massive selling point. And I think, of course, like in a lot of other industries, it can help to have the same approach. But like when I think about enterprise sales and stuff, it probably won't work. You need SaaS experience. You need that, that SDR, AE, that proper flow of that sales pipeline. Whereas it is going to be out of the box. It'll always be out of the box. And it's more of how do you connect with these people on a level where you're not selling to them, but you're connecting with them.
Yeah. There's one piece about the product when I was looking at the video. It was predictive sourcing. Can you tell me a little bit more about that, what that means? It seems like AI is having a moment right now. Tell me about that feature specifically.
For sure. So for us, like I said, we started with procurement, right? But the whole idea, let me take it a step back. When we decided we're going to build Burnt, I had spent the 2 previous years at a restaurant tech company. They were like one of the first movers of being an open marketplace for restaurants where they can find any supplier. For me, the goal with Burnt was how do you help them to improve their bottom line with data, right? So that was the premise of it. So the first step towards that was procurement. And then, like I mentioned, this back of house piece came up. So what we thought was, okay, right now restaurants, for example, we're buying 5 pounds of brisket every day over the next week. Yesterday was freezing cold. How many people were there out in the streets going out for dinner versus today? It's sunny, it's a Friday. Restaurants are probably booked out. How do you take that gut feeling and digitize it? How do you improve that with data? And how do you give it to restaurateurs in a simple way where it's, these 3 days of the week, I know exactly what I need. Whereas the next 3 days, it's going to be high foot traffic, the public holiday. It's basically taking all of these external elements that they otherwise wouldn't think about and synthesizing it in a way where it's basically automated for them, right? So it's not just about giving them the data. It's about giving them the action based on what we think on the data.
Because they don't have afternoons full to do data analysis. They sort of need it now. And how can this help me like in the next couple of minutes? That makes sense. It seems like non-coincidental that you chose New York City of all places. Is there something specific to New York and why you chose to build Burnt here?
I think when you think of the restaurant world and gastronomy and the culinary arts and stuff, New York is, I think, like the epicenter in a way. I know a lot of people will say Paris, but I personally think it's New York. Just to think.
Make some people upset with this one.
Yeah, of course. I don't mind. But I think, so many famous chefs have come here and built their career. Like, it's like Thomas Keller going to Raoul's and, building himself up from there. And, without that restaurant in New York, he wouldn't be who he is now. And the French Laundry wouldn't be there. And all these other chefs that have come out from, his world wouldn't be there. So I think it's such a epicenter. And if any restaurateur in the world, has a dream of where they want to open a restaurant, I can guarantee you in the back of their mind, it's New York. But apart from that also, like I think personally for me and my co-founder, who's also my wife, we had a difficult couple of years when we first moved here. When I was working for my family business, the supplier side of it. And I feel like New York is one of those places where if you don't match the energy and the pace, it will chew you and spit you right out. And I felt like that's what happened. But then we've come back here with a totally different mindset. And now New York City is, for me, like the land of opportunity. Like every restaurant I see on the street, I'm so excited to just walk in and tell them about Burnt and to work with them. So it is, for me, the only place I would ever want to start this and have this as like the HQ for us.
It makes sense. And so, okay, so you grew up in the industry, then you went to go lead procurement, then you worked at a food tech company as well. But it's a big jump to start a company, obviously. Tell me about the day that you decided it, or what were the big hurdles that were going in your mind? Like, what pushed you to actually go do it?
Okay, so my wife and I have known each other since we were 12, 13. We met because my uncle and her uncle became business partners and started a restaurant together. Oh, wow. So we literally grew up in the restaurant space. And it was funny because, you know, we saw them building up this restaurant from a small mom and pop to now 14 or 16 restaurants. And we always said that we're going to do something in the restaurant space. And we knew we could, we always knew we wanted to do it. We used to always joke around saying we're going to do it together. And I think both of us, we always had this mindset that we never want to settle for anything apart from starting our own business. And for me, it was always, I was always the black sheep in the family. I had tattoos, I had piercings, all this kind of stuff. And I was always underestimated, but I thrived in that, I would say, environment. And when we decided to start Burnt, at that point, Rhea had been telling me about starting a business for the better part of 5 or 6 years. And I was always like, no, I need more experience. I think I need 2 more years of this, 2 more years of that.
Common things that people tell themselves.
Yeah.
Convince themselves.
And then, you know, when we were in Dubai in 2022, I think we were pushed into a corner where it became quite evident. It was like, if we don't do this now, like we have like no savings, you know, nothing that would point us in the direction of now's the right time to start a business. Like logically, it made no sense. But for us, it was in our gut. We were like, this is the time. And I'm so glad we trusted our gut because we've learned so much and we've been able to do so much in the last like 14 to 16 months.
That's awesome. Yeah, I feel like you never really reached that point where it's like, okay, now is enough. You just got to start and take the leap. It's an emotional thing. Yeah, it is. Yeah, of course. What's it like? How, you know, your co-founder is your wife. How is that working together? How do you separate like responsibilities? Like, how do you manage that?
I think, so since we've known each other for the better part of 18 years, I cannot imagine starting a business now with anyone else because we've been, you know, in that like family friend setting from a very early age. So we were always super, super blunt with each other. Like we know we're not going to hurt each other's feelings because we're just saying how it is. And in business, it's just so easy and seamless for us where, you know, we've never even separated our responsibilities. We just knew what each other were good at, and that was the end of it. And it's just awesome. And to be honest, like it's been so amazing to see the stuff that Rhea has been able to do and, you know, put out into the world and like how she's been able to take the mind and the emotions of a chef and put it into a product. It's just awesome to see.
Yeah, that's one of the things I want to talk about. I am super inspired by the design and the videos that you all produce, like as a marketer. I feel like I'm seeing a lot of highlighter yellows, a lot of like in-your-face oranges kind of brand design, but what I don't see enough is, you know, English racing green. Tell me about the thinking behind the design aesthetic of Burnt, from the fonts to the video, you know, aesthetics. Tell me about it.
Sure. So I think when we decided we're going to start this business, we always knew. So let me take it a step back. Rhea's always been someone who's been extremely creative. It runs in her family. Her mom is one of the most creative, like home interior people that I've ever met. And I knew when we started this business, we were never going to settle for anything apart from exactly that one vision that we had in our mind. And there were 2 things. One is, how do you take that British racing green, New York streetwear, and how cool it is to be a chef and mash it into a brand? So that was the 3 things that we were working with. And we didn't want to go the regular tech route and, you know, fit in the box. We want to break the box. We want to be provocative. That's why even with the name, you know, I had a lot of people at the start, like investors and all these kind of people tell us it's a negative word, this, that. I don't care. The restaurant industry is provocative. Yeah. We want to match that level with our name and our brand and like how we go about things.
Yeah, what are the things when you see like the bear promos? It's like sweat, it's tiredness, it's anger. Like those are the emotions you get from the posters.
And how do you take that and make it look cool? Like,
Yeah.
because what I see is a lot of people, again, it comes back to the point of, as a consumer, you don't really realize how hard it is, but also how cool it is.
Yeah.
Right? Like, a lot of chefs have egos, and for a reason. It's a crazy industry to be in. So how do you take that and show it to the world? That's why, like, even with our, some of the content we're going to be posting soon, we're not talking about our product or our features or, like how much time or money it saves. We're talking about how cool these people that we're working with are. And that's the focus, right? Like, one of our customers, it was so funny when we launched in New York, one of our customers were like, so you guys aren't really a tech company. You're a restaurant business that utilizes tech for us. And I was like, yeah, that's a great way to say it.
That's a great way to say it. Yeah, sometimes your customers give you the best liners.
Yeah, 100%.
So tell me about the current state of Burnt. Like, what stage are you at? What do the next 6 months look like?
It's been amazing. So we launched in New York 2 months ago. We're going to be hitting close to 100 restaurants that are waiting to onboard onto Pro in the next few months. And Burnt Pro, which is the full back of house automation, we're slated to launch that in like June, July. And we're going to start with that wait list of restaurants. And, proudly we've been bootstrapped till now. It's been the 3 co-founders completely hustling it out for the last 16 months. Me and my wife have couch surfed in 10 different homes and like really grinded it out as founders to make sure that we build this the right way. But now we're at a point where, we have like this many people who are ready for Pro. That's when we realized that we need to pull the trigger on actually fundraising now. So we just opened up our first round 2 weeks ago, and trying to find some, restaurant industry people to invest in us as well. Yeah. Just to, 100%. And I think that also just gives a lot of confidence to us and to other restaurants who want to work with us that, there are people from the industry itself who are interested. And I think the next 6 months is going to be amazing because we're actually going to be able to see, how Burnt Pro is going to actually improve that bottom line for restaurants and like how seamless can we make it for them. So a lot of the focus, what we're doing is how do we make the onboarding super easy, right? Because one of their concerns is it takes too long to switch from one software to the other. Yeah. It's too complicated to use. I have to train all my staff. So the main thing that Rhea and my CTO work on is how do you simplify all those things? Because we know the core product, we know what that's going to do, but to get to that core product, what are the blockers? How do we remove those blockers? So that's what the next 6 months are going to look like. And that's where, this initial fundraising, it's going to help us fix all those kinks out, get our engineering team built out before we put the foot on the gas in the next 6 months.
Got it. That makes sense. And now it's really, painting a clear picture why you want people who have come from the restaurant industry. It's like everything from training staff, like a salesperson knowing that is going to be better equipped to go into that conversation than beforehand. If they're like, oh, this is a great user experience, but how do you know if you've never experienced what it's like to train a staff and what goes into that? So when I heard, you worked with 100 restaurants so far, you have a wait list. I want to dive into that. Like, what for others that are maybe thinking about building, their own dreams and, thinking about, because the launch is just as hard as it is to build. What are the lessons you've taken from launching this product successfully? Like your go-to-market strategy, what have you learned? What mistakes have you made? Tell me.
I think when a lot of people talk about founder-led sales, a lot of people ignore it. Even I did, when we first started coming up with the idea. It was like, you think, if I can just raise that 1 or 2 million, I'm going to hire all these salespeople and, get them to hit the streets, sell Burnt, and that's it. Yeah. We started doing founder-led sales when we launched in New York. And in the last month or so, we have learned so much about what that sales cycle looks like. And I think I would have wasted so much money if we had hired all these people. And you really start to understand, right? Like, it's okay to make these mistakes now. It's better you make it now versus making it when it's that one mistake costs you tens of thousands of dollars instead.
100%. That makes so much sense. It probably makes it easier to sort of pitch yourself to an investor and outline how you're going to use the funds because you've been there and you've done the process yourself and you didn't automatically go to that route. That makes sense. How do you prioritize your time as a founder?
It's really hard.
Yeah.
But I think for me, I grew up idolizing Kobe. Yeah. I used to play sports a lot when I was in school. And because he used to wake up at 4 a.m., I used to wake up at 4 a.m. So what I like to do is wake up at 4, head to the gym. When I'm in the gym, I listen to a podcast or do my reading and stuff while I'm there. And then just for the rest of the day, it's like time blocking. So the way we do it right now is Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, we're in the streets hitting up restaurants. Saturday, Sunday, Monday is our admin day where we do everything else we have to do. But a lot of the times you get pulled in different directions. I would say it's impossible as a founder to really manage your time. It's more of how do you learn how to say no? I think that's something that I've slowly started to learn. And I think Rhea's way better at me than I am. So I've been slowly starting to say, like, when some people want to hang out or grab a coffee, like, does it make most sense right now to grab that coffee, or should we just push it slate it for later when I have so many other things that I need to get done? And I think the other thing is, especially as a CEO, it's like you want to do everything all at once. Yeah. And it's so hard not to do everything all at once. And it's like you want to do it and you get frustrated because you want to do it. Then you try doing it and you cannot do it, then you get more frustrated. Right. So it's like it's very hard to be able to pull it back and then even understand like what is it that I need to do now versus what can I leave for like 2-3 months from now.
There's so many things in that I think are really helpful. Number one is, obviously the time blocking. It's like you have a set structure. It's Monday to Thursday. We're in the streets pitching restaurant owners, right? But at the same time, you're also saying no to many things, and you're really like thinking pretty strategically about how you're going to use your time versus like others maybe, I have 7 days in front of me. How do I use each of these days and how do they connect? You're thinking on the minute-to-minute basis versus day-to-day, week-to-week. I think that's pretty insightful for some folks who may be going through the process.
I've not thought about it that way. That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
The other piece is just like you cannot avoid the Monday through Thursday.
Yeah, you cannot.
You can't. Like that's the part that gets people really nervous is like, how can I do every other thing? Like I think it's Scott Galloway that says, don't necessarily, I'm paraphrasing here, but don't think you're successful because you're spending money. Like you're successful when you're getting customers inbound.
Yeah.
Yeah. And then tell me about, the next couple months. You told me you're fundraising, right? Currently actively, yes, you mentioned the connections to the restaurant industry with your investor base. What are some of the other qualities you're looking for in investors behind Burnt?
So I think one thing a lot of people are always concerned about is the restaurant industry is so antiquated. The restaurant industry is so hard to sell into. Nobody's been able to solve it. The way me and Rhea look at it is the restaurant industry is so antiquated. The restaurant industry is so hard to get into. Mm-hmm. But if you're the one to crack it,
it's a moat.
That's it.
Yeah.
Right? And we want people who understand that. We want people to look at the industry and think, wow, nobody's been able to do it. Do these founders have it in them to do it? Do these founders have it in them to run through every brick wall every day for the next 10 years? We want people to have the conviction of, I know it's really early on, but do these guys give me the impression of they're going to do whatever it takes every single day, even on the days where they don't want to do it? Because I think a lot of people are just so risk averse where it's like, we need to see this and we need to see that and we need to see this. But I read this tweet from someone today where it was, they were talking about investors in pre-seed saying, we invest in pre-seed, pre-product, pre-idea, it's all right, no worries. And then like a week later after they go through it, it's like, oh, but you don't have revenue, you don't have this, you don't have that. I think it's so important for the people who really are interested in early stage founders who a lot of the times at pre-seed, they might have a product, they might have some customers, but the real thing that drives that company are the founders and the vision of like how far are they going to go with this and how big of an impact are they going to make into the industry. Like the other thing I really want to find in people is that they see our vision as it's more than just me and Rhea and my other co-founder. It's more than them. It's 750,000 restaurants in the US, out of which 350,000 are independent restaurants. These are people who have put everything on the line to start this business that they love. And globally, it's millions of restaurants that are independently owned restaurants that we can help with this. So who wants to see that vision and back us with that?
That makes sense. Do you get asked about the sort of the industry vertical software approach versus the, not necessarily tailoring to a specific industry? I feel like there's a bit of a debate going on right now. Like, does a vertical SaaS make sense, or do you want to have a more horizontal approach? What do you think?
I think it varies depending on the sector.
Okay.
I think, for example,
what tells you a sector makes sense for vertical?
I think, for example, in the restaurant space, like you have a lot of companies that come in and try and build a standard approach. I don't believe that works. I think for us, the reason why we're building that vertical approach is because if you look, restaurants and suppliers, they don't work without each other. They won't exist without each other. So if you don't build for both of them, you're tilting too far to one side. And it moves the balance of the way that industry works. And the second you move the balance, you become a middleman. And that's the last thing you want to do in an industry where relationships are everything. Right. So for us, that vertical approach of helping both restaurants and suppliers is super important.
Gotcha. You mentioned idolizing Kobe growing up. Is there a founder or an investor, a dream investor that you want to meet?
Want to meet, and I would like to get an investment from them.
Yeah.
I think for me, someone that I've looked up to from his early days as a founder is Brian Chesky. I think the way he's built Airbnb up and the way he's built himself up as a CEO, because a lot of the times founders aren't meant to be CEOs, especially CEOs at public companies, right? It's a whole nother ballgame. But to see his development as a founder and just the way he describes things and talks about it, and it's just incredible to see. And like, I'd love to, be in my own right the way he's grown. Right. And I love the way he thinks about product as design. Like for us, even for us, the way Rhea leads the whole product side of things is, how do we design something that the restaurant industry loves? How do you use design in a way that it improves the product? Because for us, a lot of the times, our engineers are like, why are we building it this way? Because they don't understand that we're designing it with the restaurant industry in mind, with these chefs in mind. And we're breaking all of these norms that these engineers are so used to. We're breaking these boxes, we're breaking all these ideas that they're used to and building it with this particular mindset. So I think, just like he talks about design, even for us, it's such a core component of how we are going to build our moat.
That makes sense. Do you have any thoughts on like the future of NYC tech? Like, there's this data point that us at Bro, we keep going back to. It was in Lightspeed Ventures report, and it said that New York City accounted for 15% of all US-based VC funding last year for the first time ever. And like, you relate that to 23% in the Bay Area. Feels like we're having a bit of a moment, but you're a founder here in New York. What do you think?
I think from my experience, so, having had the opportunity to see what the tech space was in another country and then come here, the founders here are it's a different breed in terms of what they're building, but also how open they are to paying it forward. I think it's very much that idea of nurturing the industry and nurturing the people around them. And I've seen, like, for example, last year's New York Tech Week, there were so many people who were either moved or in the process of moving to New York from the West Coast. So there is this massive shift. And I think the cool thing about it is it's such a collaborative ecosystem where everyone just wants to help. Like, I've had so many people over the last couple of months as founders point me in directions or help me out with something that I didn't know, that because I'm a first-time founder. 99% of things I don't know what I'm doing, now I'm just at 100%. But now I'm at a point where I know people are helping me. I cannot wait to be in a position where I can then pay it forward to someone else. And I think that's what it's all about. That's what New York Tech is about, and that's why I think it's going to be. I don't think it's just a moment.
Right.
That's my answer. I don't think it's just a moment. I think it's here to stay.
Gotcha. Last question is, you grew up in the restaurant industry, you're here in New York. What are the restaurants like that you think people have to go to? Like, what is your favorite place to go eat?
That's a really tough question. So one spot me and my wife love is Fiascateria Pistoia on Christopher Street. Gotcha. It's like small hole in the wall Italian restaurant, probably has 16 seats. The guy is there making the pasta in front of you. It's just incredible. It's amazing. Like, you have all of these incredibly famous and hard to get in Italian restaurants in New York. I think just go to Fiascateria on Christopher Street. It's amazing. And one more is, I don't know if you've heard of Thai Diner. They have this breakfast sandwich. It is the best. I love it.
It's a favorite of rowers here.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Every time I get out at 6 p.m. on a Thursday, I always text my girlfriend, like, do you want to go to Thai Diner? Like,
It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, thanks for joining us. Your story is amazing. We're rooting for Burnt. Excited to see where you guys go.
Thank you. It was a pleasure.